Good morning, good afternoon, folks. We will get started in just a little few seconds. Gonna give folks a little time to adjust playing music and also talking. If you can't hear any of those things, but you can see my lips moving, check your audio settings, and we'll get started in just a second. Morning, afternoon. This is the litmus test to see who is on the West Coast and who's joining us from the East Coast. Morning to the West Coasters, Midwesterns, and afternoon to all of our Eastern folks. Look at that, look at that. All right, I'm going to get us started. Y'all are already introducing yourselves, and we have plans for that. But keep on introducing yourself in the chat if you want. We do have some interactivity planned in just a second, so we'll get that started. I'm just going to handle a couple housekeeping tips or just a couple housekeeping things, and then we'll get rolling. So welcome everybody to our national webinar, Setting the Standard, How CSH Supportive Housing Standards Can Enable High-Performing Supportive Housing. Really excited to share this with you all. We're going to, we only are together for an hour, so we're going to do some high-level reviews and try to answer as many questions as we can. But we are also going to follow up with a ton of resources, so please don't fret about that. This is being recorded live. We will make the recording available to you all after the fact. So if you have anybody who registered or colleagues who wanted to attend and were not able to, they will have access to this recording after the fact. We will also share the slides that will have live links to everything that we share here and in the chat, so folks can also access that as well after the fact. There is over 400 of you in this room and counting. So going to ask folks, you are all muted, and going to ask folks to use the chat to communicate with folks. We're going to have a couple options for interactivity, as I said, and also going to direct you to, if you have any questions, to the Q&A feature. So if you don't see that on your Zoom controls, highly recommend you setting up your meeting, looking at your meeting controls, and making sure you can access the Q&A feature, which should be in the bottom middle of your Zoom control panel. I have some fabulous colleagues that are helping me along the way that you can see as panelists that are going to be help monitoring the Q&A as well as the chat. But I am going to be the sole voice that you hear today. My name's Ariana Saunders. I work with the Training Center, and a part of my role is that I get the opportunity to lead this quality work, which means, yes, you see my face, and yes, you're hearing my voice today, but it is absolutely a collaborative effort. I have the pleasure of working with my fabulous team, the Training Center team, as well as the Special Projects team, who really stepped up this past year and really helped us take a look at our quality standards, get some feedback across the country from community partners such as yourselves, as well as other colleagues at CSH, to figure out how can we continue to update our standards, make them relevant, and really meet the moment and the times that folks are working in supportive housing right now. So excited to share all that work with you all and give you a preview of our new standards and review some tools that we've also updated along the way. This is a big rollout with updating the standards. It does mean a lot of our tools need some deep revision and intentional updates as well. So going to talk about that later, but just want folks, and I thank you in advance for your patience as we do all this updating. As you can imagine, it is a heavy lift, and we're trying to be as collaborative and intentional in that process as possible, which just means, sometimes it takes a little extra time to do those things. So appreciate everybody's patience. Over the course of the past, 8 months or so. So appreciate that. Well, you all are already doing the fabulous work. So continue to introduce yourself in the chat, but I'm also going to ask you all to humor me with a little Mentimeter. For those of you who have ever done a training with us at CSH, or some of our local teams, or with the Training Center webinar, CSH Training Center, we love a good poll and a good Mentimeter. We like to do these things and show them graphically. So just going to go through a couple slides on the Mentimeter to gauge who's in the room. Now, many of you are already doing this in the chat. As I said, you can continue to do that. If you're unable to navigate to the link that I just posted online, I'm also going to pull it up here on the screen and pull up a QR code. So if you have a smartphone, you can pull up that QR code that you're seeing on your screen, or since y'all are so busy in the chat, you've probably already lost that link that I put in there. So I'm going to put it in again for folks to access that. And so what we're going to see is these dots grow with some numbers. just would love to get a gauge of who's in the room with us and where you all are joining. So if you can find your states, uh, if you're really a geography whiz and you can find your city within that state, go ahead and drop a pin there. And this is just going to give us a gauge of where folks are joining us. So yes, good afternoon to all my East Coast folks. We see folks in New York, the Carolinas, Florida. Got someone joining us from some lovely islands, I think, Puerto Rico. Love it, love it. We are growing international, folks. Look at those dots. Love it, love it. We've got folks up in Canada, as well as it looks like. Is that in the Netherlands? Woohoo. Okay, you guys are testing my geography knowledge. I'm going to let this go just a little bit longer so folks can get a gauge of who's in the room, and then we're going to ask you about your role. Look at that. Welcome, Alaska. We got folks from everywhere. Okay, it looks like New York, East Coast, California. Those numbers are growing so big, I can't even tell, but you're definitely representing. And I see you all in the chat. Oakland, New York, Washington, Detroit's in the house, Connecticut. I see you, Arizona. Love it, love it, love it. All right, we're going to give it a couple more seconds. Don't fret if you weren't able to find your pin and drop it in here. Again, this is just a little fun just for us to gauge who's in the room and hopefully get you all to see what community you have out there of folks that care about supportive housing and want to see us do quality supportive housing for the folks there. Okay, Delane, Bay Area. All right. I'm from the Bay Area, so I'm a little biased. All right. I am going to keep us moving and see. So you've let us know where you're joining us from. We've got folks from all across the world, actually, which is quite fun and exciting to say. Would love for you also to let us know what is your role within supportive housing. This is, you can pick more than one. I know many of you might feel like you do all of these things. Some of you are a little bit more focused on specific aspects when it comes to supportive housing, but would love to gauge that too. This will also just help me frame a little bit how we talk about our standards, recognizing that some of you might be doing this directly in the work. I see property managers, counselors, advocates, some data analysts. Ooh, don't get me started on data. Compliance manager, love it, love it. So you can let us know your role in these broader categories. Support services providers seems to be the biggest group so far. And if you say other, you can throw that in the chat as well. I figured we'd have some of our compliance, evaluation monitoring folks. We'll create a separate space for those of us who like that can geek out over data. We're not going to talk too much about data today, but love having you all here. This is super important. Advocates, love to see you all here. And funders, we are going to talk about how you can utilize these standards and some of our tools at the system level. So welcome, welcome. Love to have you all here. Community partners, can't do this without you all. So excited to see some of you in the room. And as expected, a big chunk of the folks in the room are folks that are in there doing the work within the programs, either as a provider of supportive housing or owner and operator, those of you that are working in the services, as well as property management side. So love this. This gives us just a great kind of overview of who's in the room. Let us know who's here joining us. I'm really excited to talk to you all about how these standards can really apply to all of you in your roles, and hopefully you all can find a way to utilize these roles and a tool to do that. So looking forward to that. All right, so I'm going to get us started and keep us moving, but thank you all for joining us. This is just really exciting to me. I hope everybody just takes the time and takes some breath to just recognize, look at this chat, look at what we just saw on the map and that graph that we just saw. There is a ton of people in this room, a lot of geography covered, a lot of roles, expertise, experience covered. So super excited to see you all there. I see some hands raised. And so I'm gonna say, if you have a question, if I can direct you to the Q&A, just for the sake of time, I will try to get that. And actually, let me make sure I open up my own Q&A box. But also, if you have a question, can you private chat one of us panelists, and we can hopefully help you if it's a tech question. So if not, I'm going to keep us moving along. Fortunately, there's way more people in here. I don't have enough time to unmute folks and answer questions like that. So it's going to direct folks to open up the Q&A feature. Thank you, thank you. All right, hands are down. I'm assuming you got your questions answered, or my fabulous team, Maya and Amber, providing me support here, have helped address some of those questions. So first, just going to do a little bit background and talk about why focus on quality, how this really relates to the broader work that CSH is doing. I see you are joining us from across the country, across the world, really, and in various roles. And so how you've interacted with CSH probably looks a little different depending on that. And so just really kind of want to give a little bit of background on that. And then we will move through and introduce the standards, and we'll do a little drum roll to introduce the standards. So first, just want to say, as you know, CSH really is, our mission really is to help those most impacted by some of the complex challenges and barriers we see in our community, especially when it gets to folks being able to access the services they rightfully need and want, as well as knowing how much providing and offering secure housing to folks, real and affordable housing to folks, really helps reduce any barriers to accessing those services and really provides people a quality of life that we want for ourselves, our loved ones, and all of our neighbors and community members. And so what we see in the work that we do, whether it's through our lending, through the technical assistance and coaching you see that we do in communities, and the training that we're doing in communities, as well as a lot of the policy work. And I know I have colleagues on this call that also do a lot of advocacy and policy work contributing to that, so our communities and our systems can be set up for success to support more supportive housing being built in our communities. What we see all of that doing is really contributing to that. And we know in all of that work that we do, the emphasis in really not only just being able to define what is supportive housing, the various models that are out there, and the various folks and populations that it can really serve and impact all of our communities positively. We also know that being able to define quality really helps set a standard and gives us something to strive for. And so in the work that CSH has done, and in the many communities and the various folks that we know are being served in supportive housing, really recognizing, CSH has been around for over 30 years. And so in all of that work, we recognized several years ago that, there wasn't one voice that was really contributing to that in terms of really defining what is quality supportive housing, especially doing it in a way that we felt was broad enough to address the various and complex challenges that many of you were experiencing in your communities, whether it's a rural community or highly resourced urban community, recognizing that, and systems, in the various ways that they're resourced when it comes to the services and, resources that folks need to maintain their housing, really recognizing that there was a need to really provide some definition for that and provide some standards. And so in the work that we were doing, we really polled and really brought and did some research locally and nationally, locally in the communities that we were really connected with, as well as nationally across the board, and really tried to figure out how can we define quality supportive housing. And so several years ago, we did that. And many of you might be familiar with that. And we called those back then, way back in the early 200s, 2000s, is that what we call them? The aughts. We developed dimensions of quality. And so at the time, it was as a way for us to create a framework to really define quality supportive housing and really provide that and help guide the work that we were doing, again, as we were from the lending to the policy to the technical support and training that we were providing communities and programs. And so we really saw a need to do that. And so we defined it. We used dimensions of quality over time, and over the past 15 to 20 years, that has evolved over time. And most recently, many of you may have been aware, we did a big major push about 3 years ago in 2022, where we now refined it and calling them standards. And now we call them standards of supportive housing, or quality standards of supportive housing. And again, the idea here was really trying to use plain language that was meaningful for folks. We heard feedback that dimensions, we weren't really sure what that was. But we also felt like as CSH, as the work that we were doing out there in the communities and the history that we'd proven along the way, being around for over 30 years, really had created a footing that we felt strong and that we could call them standards and hopefully set the standard, like a little set the standard for what quality supportive housing can look like, recognizing that when we do define high quality and we're all on the same page about what that looks like and what that means, that's when we can get really intentional in the support we provide you all in terms of how that you can apply those standards to the work that you're doing and really set up programs for success to make sure that their policies, procedures are set up that way. And so in doing so, we were hoping to continue to provide that technical assistance and training and coaching that we do in communities to really help foster a stronger organizational capacity. So at the program level, organizations felt like they had the policies and procedures set up to set themselves up for success to operate quality supportive housing. We also felt like we were helping do that through our advocacy work and ongoing TA that we also do at the system level, working with continuums of care, housing finance agencies, public housing agencies, anyone that at the system level was really looking at supportive housing, developing new units of supportive housing, and being able to provide them support there. Having standards be that fundamental base to really help provide that ongoing support is how we really approach this work and saw this that could be helpful. And so in developing those effective policies and procedures, building people's organizational capacity, whether again, you're at the funder, developer, or program level, but also being able to make sure that we can also help provide more support and also more information so we can be intentional about any of the advocacy efforts we're doing to make sure at the system level there were system improvements and policies that were also and practices that were being put in place to help that. All of this is done because why? We know that when we do this, when we focus on quality and we have these intentional efforts, that'll lead to the quality results or outcomes that we want to see for the folks being served. And that's where it goes. And that's the core of why many of us get into this work, right? We're passionate folks that want to see our communities thrive, want to see our neighbors and their community, fellow community partners survive, so not just survive, but thrive in our communities. And so we know that by focusing on quality, defining it, and helping build capacity, whether it's through direct training to staff, or again, like I said, doing some system improvement work that many of our geo teams do, really being able to provide that is going to lead to those outcomes, which I'll talk about in just a second. So that's really just the foundation behind why CSH took this effort. Again, you can go to csh.org and get familiar with, we have a ton of products and other work that we do. Not going to be able to cover all that here, but encourage you all to visit our site to get more access to that. And again, I'll give you some links and some emails that you can also contact if you're newer to working with us at CSH, just to get a little bit more familiar about who might be the best folks for you to be talking to support some of your efforts. Yeah, and so just to clarify, I see a question in the chat. Do you want to make the distinction between PSH? Many of you may be familiar with that term, permanent supportive housing. And what we say at CSH is supportive housing. And so the way I personally, Ari, like to define that is you'll see one of our standards in supportive housing is sustainability. And the idea is really that supportive housing really is permanent in nature and how we define it. So we've taken out that term just as a way to clarify it, but it's also to make the distinction between the fact that PSH very much is a program type that is often funded through HUD, Housing and Urban Development Department, federal department, and through their COC or Continuum of Care program, where it directly funds permanent supportive housing programs. HUD defines who should be served in those programs, what are the priority populations that be served in those programs. And so is very distinct. When we talk about supportive housing at CSH, we're talking about those folks, as well as many, many other folks that can be served in supportive housing or can be tenants in supportive housing. That can be transition age youth, it can be families, it can be somebody diagnosed with an intellectual disability, it can be somebody diagnosed with a serious mental illness, it can be somebody that's experienced chronic homeless, long-term or frequent episodes of homelessness, it can be somebody that is exiting an institution such as the justice system or psychiatric system or behavioral health system in your community. It can really serve a wide range of folks. And so when we're talking about supportive housing and our standards for supportive housing, that's what we're talking about. And so when I go into the standards, I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that really is the end goal here is we really want to be able to have standards that can speak to the broad group of folks that are served in supportive housing. So it goes a little bit beyond what many of you may be familiar with when you hear the term PSH or permanent supportive housing. Thank you for that question. All right, so in moving along for that too, just to also kind of frame our approach to quality and quality standards at CSH, Really just want to kind of gauge and get a feel for the room of the folks in the room. When you hear these words, quality assurance and compliance, what are the first kind of words or terms that come to mind? And so you can put this in the chat or you can put it in the Mentimeter, which I'm going to put up again. No right or wrong answers. I appreciate brave souls that are putting it in the chat. But if you also want to use the Mentimeter as a way to have a more anonymous way to share that, would love to do that. And I will say, share all the words. Let's just get it out here. Let's just get on the same page of what we're talking about. I will say this as somebody who served as a compliance officer before. I've served in the quality assurance department as well as the quality improvement department. And we're going to distinguish between those in just a second. But would love to just get a gauge from folks because when we hear quality, when we hear standards, I know folks go to this. Okay, we're talking quality assurance and compliance, and really want to be able to clarify at least CSH's approach to this work and what maybe distinguishes us from the work that we do versus other folks that you may interact with from maybe a compliance or auditing perspective. All right, so ooh, lots of words coming up. I see in the chat we have things like rules, accountability, monitoring, checks and balances, benchmarking. Love it, love it, love it. I hear engagement, goal achievement. Okay, Diane, thank you for that. Accuracy, engagement. Yes, Victoria. Okay, and so we see accountability, documentation, regulations, paperwork is coming up. That's usually one big one, paperwork. Nobody just typed in because maybe we don't know how to spell it, just a ugh. Some people hear quality assurance and compliance and they're like, ugh, more work. Somebody's going to come and double check everything. Some of us, I don't see that, but I've definitely felt it having also worked on the program side of supportive housing. Some anxiety, right? Is somebody going to come and double check my work and tell me I didn't dot my I's and cross my T's? And how hard that is to do that when I'm out in community trying to focus and work with people that really need help. Um, okay, I do see red tape coming up a little bit. People are naming, I see an acronym, and I'm assuming that is probably an agency that might be doing some of that work in your community. Regulations, standards of care. Oh, that feels very behavior healthy-ish. Thank you, folks. Reports, regulations. Oh no, and I'm looking at the smaller ones. Risk mitigation, losing funding. We don't want folks to do that. Best practices, workforce development, all the things, all the things. Yeah, Vanessa can help us understand level of care. All right, I'm just double checking the chat to see if I missed anything. Accuracy, I love that. Oversight. Okay, no wrong or wrong answers, right? Because this is how what comes to your mind, and like probably some of the things that we probably much of it's guided by many of the experiences we've had in working in the field or working with folks that have those roles. And so just kind of want to get that out there. I appreciate that there's, there's some honesty in the sense that, they're not always maybe positive words that come to mind when we think of things like that. Some of us may have not had positive interactions with that. And I also appreciate that many of you are seeing some of the positives and strengths, or maybe the intention behind this work when we think about quality assurance and compliance, which really is how do we hold people accountable? How do we set the standards and make sure people are meeting the regulations? It absolutely, most of those things are set up for the purpose of folks wanting to see consistency in the programs and the units that they're funding and supporting, right? All of that makes sense and is very much a big part of this overall work that we do. And as part of probably the overall system that many of us work within, whether we work for an agency that helps do some of this work, or we're working for an agency that's funded or accessing resources within the system to do the work that we're doing. All of it's important, and all of it absolutely is impacted in some way, some shape or form by this work. We just want to, y'all keep putting that stuff in the Menti. We're going to have a really pretty and intricate word cloud, which again, we can also share with folks if folks want to reflect on that. But it just gives us a good visual. I think to reiterate and validate a lot of what you all said is what you're seeing on your screen now, which is on the left side of the screen, right? And so that's quality assurance. And that's a lot of many people's kind of first kind of introduction to standards or regulation or even defining quality when it comes to this work that we do. Just really want to make the distinction that from CSH's perspective, we really take a quality improvement angle to it. And so did CS folks were registering, we got a couple questions, and I think that that PSH question was very helpful too, to really make that distinction. CSH's role within this work is we're not a direct funder, right, for a lot of supportive housing. We are often in a contract and work with and support funders who are doing this work. So you might see us in the field and in your communities doing work that feels like we're monitoring and evaluating your work. But really from a CSH perspective and in the work that we do around quality, and you'll see the quality tools and resources that we've developed to support programs, meet the standards that I will soon define, I will get to them, I promise, is we take this quality improvement approach. And really it's because we see that if when we focus on quality improvement, if we start shooting for that North Star, right, and we listen to the folks that are closest to the work, meaning the staff that are doing this work, the tenants and clients that are being served by supportive housing programs. If we're listening to them and really getting everybody's voice involved and really making it a collaborative effort, that's when we really get to see success. Again, because we're not funders and we're not determining some of this and we're not coming from a regulatory perspective, we really like to do this work where we get to reward innovation and let, and permit those options for folks to fail. Meaning, it's the folks that we serve in supportive housing is evolving every day. Our systems are evolving every day. And so really recognizing that there's a lot of innovation that can really be crucial in creating these interventions and really providing services and the support that folks need in our programs. And they're not always going to be successful for everyone, right? Being person-centered and really focusing on individual needs means that there's a little bit of trial and error there, and we recognize that. And so we've really taken this perspective when it comes to developing these standards, as well as the tools that we've developed to accompany it, to hopefully support that. And our goal is to really hopefully support many of you all in your overall quality improvement work that you do, whether it's at the system or program level, so we can continue to prove and demonstrate that supportive housing is a very effective and successful intervention when it really comes to meeting those in our communities that have complex needs and are facing some barriers that we know are um, absolutely barriers that we can overcome and help them push through, hopefully. So just wanted to make that distinction. And again, as I said, we know by doing that, we get to reach the quality outcomes or positive results that we want to see for our folks. And so there's a whole separate document that is a part of our quality toolkit and is on there that we will absolutely be supporting with you all, and gives you a little bit more details about some of these outcomes, even suggestions on how you might measure them. But just want to give you just a general framework. Again, this is high level. I only got 30 more minutes with y'all, is to make sure that we just understand these are kind of the broad categories of results and outcomes that we know supportive housing can achieve for folks, especially when we have this focus on quality and this intentionality about how to apply and implement supportive housing programs. So of course we want to see tenants stay housed, right? We know that what makes supportive housing unique in many of our communities is we take out a lot of barriers that folks often face when it comes to accessing housing. We get them in there quickly, but we also do a lot of support and wraparound services to make sure they can continue to stay housed as long as they want to and need to, or at least as long as they need that level of support. Of course, we want to make sure that we center the tenants in all the things we do until making sure that they're satisfied with their housing and the services that they're being offered is really going to be crucial to that, because we know when folks are happy and feeling like they're surviving and thriving and that their needs and wants are being met, that's just going to lead to overall longevity, but also a lot of these other outcomes that we also want to see, which is we want to see folks establish some kind of economic stability, meaning if they're able to increase their income or employment, they're able to do that, or at least access resources to help provide more, security, economic security, or financial security for their household. We also want to see folks' overall wellness improve, and we also want to make sure that folks feel socially connected and involved and connected to their community, because we as humans are social beings, and we recognize that is a big part of folks being able to stay housed, but also is what many folks define what success looks like for them as an individual, and what thriving can look like for folks once they are housed in your fabulous programs. All right, I'm just gonna do a quick scan of the chat. All right, okay, people love the CQI approach. Absolutely, Melody, right? Yes, it's about improvement, focusing on what folks want. I often like to tell folks too what distinction between quality improvement and quality assurance is. I almost see quality assurance as the baseline, right? That's just making sure we're kind of doing the outputs we need. We're doing some of those basic documentations, but if we move beyond that and really look at overall improvement and growth for our programs, for our staff, and for the folks that we're serving in our programs, a lot of that quality assurance stuff comes with it, right? We kind of have to do some of those things to get there anyways, but focusing on quality improvement just feels a little better. It's much more tenant centered. Thank you, Andrea or Andrea. It really does align more with many of your approaches to the work when it comes to being person centered. And yes, some of that trauma informed design and development that we know is so key. All right. Thanks, folks. Okay. So let's get to the core of why we're here. We are so excited. We have done lots of work to update these standards. So really excited to share this with you all. I recognize some names on here. So many of you are going to be very familiar with these previous standards, but excited to just give you a little bit of background about our standards and then share the updated newly released standards. And so just as baseline, just quickly want to address the fact, and this is a little bit of what I touched on before, distinguishing our standards and our approach to supportive housing from maybe other programs and other fidelity measures that you may be utilizing. CSH really did try to make this more broad and all encompassing. And so some of these things that you may be seeing when it comes to HUD or SAMHSA and other funders that you may be accessing resources from, we absolutely do try to encompass some of those in our work. Again, we go a little bit beyond those or higher level in terms of thinking about them. These probably get into the really intricacies, especially when you're serving specific populations. And so just really want to make sure we make that distinction. We're looking at this a little bit broader. And so always going to offer folks more resources or encourage folks to reach out to your local team members or any CSHers that you're currently engaged with and in contact with if you want to drill down to these to be a little bit more specific to your community or the specific population and types of households that you're serving in your projects. But do just want to recognize that we build this upon a lot of the other work that's been done, a lot of the foundational work that's been done across the years when it comes to supporting folks in housing. And so just want to also call that out and recognize that a lot of that has informed the work that we did when it comes to developing our standards from the very beginning when they were dimensions all the way until now. So quickly just going to say the process that we used. Again, you're only seeing my face and my voice, but there were a ton of other folks, including Maya, Amber, and other folks part of the special projects team and other folks at CSH that really contributed to this work. And so that is an absolute privilege I get to be able to say this, but I cannot take credit for it because this absolutely was a collaborative effort. And so way from the very beginning, as I talked about earlier with CSH did this work, a lot of that was like what I'm framing as landscape research, looking at data in the communities we were working with, talking to communities, talking to providers, getting their input on what they thought was core about supportive housing and what was important for it. We did that when we originally developed the dimensions, and we did that, and we've done that several times along between now and then, especially within this past year, to really make sure that we make sure these standards are constantly adapting to and meeting the current moment in our communities and in our overall systems. So we did that research, got some of that data. Some of that research and data really did mean taking some intentional time to get input from providers and communities. And so hopefully some of you are on here who've participated in that work because maybe you participated in a focus group. We conducted several focus groups, both with providers of supportive housing as well as tenants or folks that used to live in supportive housing that serve as advocacy roles. So some of you advocates on here might have been a part of that input as well. And so we did a lot of that intentionally this year. I will say over the course of time, every time you interact with CSHers and you're doing some of that work, you're giving us intentional input through surveys, through trainings, or just ongoing conversations that we have with you. We take a lot of that into consideration. And so a big part of that was talking to other CSHers. And so any feedback and input you gave them along the way, we asked them to give us as well in terms of really wanting to make sure we're responding to the needs of the folks out there that are doing the work, right? That's why we're doing this. We want to support you all. And so we have to make sure that the support we're offering through our standards and through the tools associated with those standards really are meeting them. So that's what we're really trying to do there. Along the way, we've done some testing and retesting. And so many of you who I either directly interacted with or you interacted with another CSH, or anytime you gave us feedback about, ooh, this tool's not so helpful, or I don't really understand this question, all of that has been a part of our ongoing continuous quality improvement process when it comes to updating these standards. And it was very intentional too in doing that internally before we release any tools to you all to make sure that hey, they work, right? Especially in the age of technology. But also they're meaningful to you all, they make sense, and they're really accessible to you in a way that you can utilize these tools right away, recognizing that many of you don't have hours and hours upon hours to read something. And so the easier and more bite-sized we can make things so you can use them really quickly was really a goal here too. So taking all that ongoing feedback, we really made these updates and made some changes. And so just very high level, these are kind of the changes you'll see. Before I introduce the standards, I like to make the joke we integrated the integrated standard into our 4 other standards. So many of you may have been familiar with our 5 dimensions of quality or our 5 standards of quality for supportive housing. We now have 4. So, and part of a lot of the feedback we heard from you all is there's a lot of words. Our guidebook was 28 pages long. And so I know not everybody had all the time in the world to sit there and read 28 pages and thoroughly digest it. So a big part of this work was how can we streamline some of this and really simplify it, and really get to the core of what is really, really key about some best practices or impactful practices in supportive housing that really should be a part of our standards, and what are things that we can maybe place somewhere else. As I said, if you want to drill down or really dig even deeper into some of these things to really make sure we're doing this work and meeting the needs of the folks that you're serving. So we took some of that out, and part of that was recognizing that a lot of things that fell under integrated could be integrated, sorry for my corny jokes, into these other ones. So we only have 4 standards now. We really did try to focus and drill down. And so this standards guidebook is really for folks at the program level, meaning we're talking about what are things that you can really control and implement or monitor at the program level. So we removed any things that probably reflected things that probably are more of a community-wide or system-wide discussion or processes. And so again, this is a rollout. We have some really exciting plans on how to create and support more of you that are at the system level, and community-wide kind of efforts that can really create a system and create a community that also sets supportive housing programs up for success. We recognize supportive housing is not operated in isolation, and it is absolutely a community effort. But for this purpose, we really wanted to make sure folks at the program level had tools that were really relevant to them and within their realm of control and influence. And so you'll see that's how we've simplified the standards a lot and really focused there on that. We've updated the core component and made some languages changes. And again, it was really about just meeting the moment of where we are in 2025, feedback from you all in terms of what you're seeing in your communities, and just really making sure that our language is intentional and meaningful to everybody that works in supportive housing. Again, recognizing what I said before, communities are wide variety of folks that are being served in supportive housing, the types of communities that are building supportive housing and uplifting supportive housing programs all look very different. So we wanted to make sure that the language was as simplified as possible, but also not too jargony, and not too specific to maybe specific populations or how other communities or jurisdictions utilize supportive housing or talked about it. All right. So those are the main changes. Are we ready? Drum roll. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this because we have a whole guidebook that defines this, but just really excited to share with you all what our overall standards are. And so we have 4, as I said, tenant-centered. Really what that's talking about is housing and the services focus on the tenant's needs and are really designed and delivered in collaboration with them. And so again, it starts with them, it ends with them, really making sure all the work that we do is really meeting their needs and that their voices are being heard, and also really utilizing their expertise, their knowledge about what it means to live in supportive housing to make sure our programs are responsive to that. We want to make sure they're accessible, really just recognizing again that supportive housing can serve a variety of folks from a variety of backgrounds. And so wanting to make sure that we really think about that when we're building our programs, whether we're building single site or engaging new landlords and trying to find additional units in our communities, really making sure that we can find opportunities to do that so folks can get into housing quickly and they're able to maintain their housing over a long period of time, right? As long as they need it. Again, as I said, this is nothing of this is done in isolation, and that graph that we showed before really showed the variety of folks and roles or partners that really contribute to supportive housing programs being successful. And so the coordinated standard really just gets at that. How are the various partners from owners, developers, service providers, property managers, landlords, community partners that we rely so heavily on to make sure folks have comprehensive services and access to resources to maintain the stability of their overall household. All of that really comes into play when it comes to really providing a quality supportive housing program, and us as supportive housing providers to be able to achieve the goals we want to see for the tenants and what our tenants are saying they want to achieve as their own personal goals. And then, of course, lastly but not least, sustainable. Again, recognizing supportive housing is such a key intervention when it comes to some really complex challenges that our communities are facing, especially around people experiencing homelessness or housing instability, as well as access to services. And resources that they need to maintain their housing. Being able to do that in a way that means our housing programs are set up for the long term is really important as well. And so making sure the housing and the services are designed and maintained to ensure that long term sustainability and consistency, as well as quality over time. A lot of that speaks to funding, but a lot of that speaks to a lot of the work that you all are doing when it comes to being responsive, accessing new and innovative services, and just overall asset management or maintaining properties or relationships with landlords that you all work so hard to do, because we know how important that is. What you'll see in the guidebook is, and I just alluded to, the way CSH has organized our standards and is really around the four major components we see that contribute to pretty much all supportive housing programs. And so one is the overall management and administration of that. And so that's really just the process of operating and overseeing a supportive housing, making key decisions around programming, staffing, funding. All of that is really going to contribute to this core component. And within that component, which I'll share in a second, is broken down under each standard: tenant-centered, accessible, coordinated, and sustainable. We do the same when it comes to landlord and property management. And so this includes, property management includes processing rental applications, collecting rent payments, maintaining the housing units or buildings, and coordinating with service staff. All of these fabulous work that I know many of you do who selected property manager in the beginning. Property management is often conducted on-site by staff or contractors, or by private landlords that we work with in collaboration in our communities, right? And so under that component, we define each of the standards related to that component from that role. Support services, which I know a bulk of you are from this role or come from this perspective when it comes to supportive housing. And that really is providing all those critical supports we know are necessary to help tenants sustain their housing long-term and thrive in their units in their community. And so a lot of this involves the robust services that many of you are offering that are comprehensive, responsive, and voluntary to the tenants and clients that you're serving. And then community engagement and planning. What we talk about here, again, really talks about supportive housing be a community effort or an intervention for communities, but it also involves building partnerships among other community organizations and partners, ensuring that supportive housing connects tenants to their neighbors. And so that's fostering that sense of community for the folks that we're serving in supportive housing as well. Is also making sure that we're working to meet the tenants' needs, because we know this will bolster the broader community goals when it comes to, again, access to resources, services, and addressing housing instability and homelessness in our communities. So that's how we do it. That's how the four components. What you'll see in the guidebook is a matrix that kind of looks like this. I made it a little bit more colorful for the sake of this slide. And so you'll see each of these components then have a broader definition under each of the standards. So you can look at it through a standard accessible and compare what that looks like across each of these components. So that would be going that one way, or you can look down and find your role, support services, and see how we define each of those standards based on your role and from that perspective. And so you can do that there too. So again, I don't want to belabor too much of this. I want to make sure that there's room for questions at the end, but I am going to quickly just walk through and give you a sample of what that looks like, and we further define it, because you can't read what's on that matrix that I just shared with you guys. It was really just a visual. But when we talk about tenant-centered management and administrative side, it really means like, how are we working with tenants to help guide and making sure tenants really serve as a guide or facilitator when it comes to developing our projects, maintaining our projects, and really including them in that over continuous improvement, to make sure that the program is successful and that they're successful within their programs and their new housing. When it comes to property management and landlord side, it really making sure that tenants have choice in their housing options, right? And that they're quickly connected to the services and support they need. And then on the service side is really making sure our services are responsive to their needs, that they're voluntary, comprehensive, flexible, and available to them when and as long as they need them. And then also on the community side, community engagement side, really making sure that tenants have meaningful opportunities for leadership and advocacy if they choose, but also that they can choose from a variety of options in their program. A lot of this may mean a lot of the coordinated efforts you all do to make sure when tenants are ready to move on, either because they want a lower or higher level of care, that we are able to provide those connections for folks as well. Accessible, I'm not going to belabor that. I want to make sure I have some time, but again, it's really making sure it's affordable is a key part to it, and making sure that our programs and policies don't have any barriers or create rules that are unnecessary for folks. And so tenant impact, feedback is going to be important, but at the program administrative side, that's really important. Also making sure that we have units that are available to meet the needs of folks, regardless of their backgrounds and abilities, and that the leases mimic what we see in other communities and other program housing types, meaning we're not adding extra restrictions to that. Again, reducing barriers, that's what makes supportive housing so unique and amazing. On the services side, that they're conveniently located and offered to folks whenever we can. And then also making sure that on the community level, that we're really working with partners to collaborate with them when it comes to moving in quickly, and getting tenants able to navigate that process as quickly as possible. Because we know it can be complicated, right? And really helpful. All right. Thanks. Oh yeah, thanks, Amber. I did say that at the beginning. We will share the slides. These slides were developed with the intention that we are going to share them with you all. That's why there's a lot of words on them. And so absolutely. And I'll be sharing some links in just a second. Coordinated, again, same thing. At the management level, we want to make sure all partners understand their role and we have shared goals and really focusing on that continuous improvement towards the program. We want to make sure landlords and property managers are working together to get folks moved in quickly and achieving some of those housing stability. Making sure that service providers are coordinating with property management, landlords, and other resources to, again, meet all the needs of the tenants. And then, of course, all that collaborative work is really done and hopefully as simple as possible so we can have a really community-wide effort when it comes to increasing housing and accessibility and availability of housing to the folks in our community. Sustainability is what I said, right? It's really making sure that we have sufficient funding to really make sure the housing can be maintained. So a lot of you that are operating supportive housing know how challenging that can be. So we have a lot of resources around funding and budget management, and we're producing some new ones coming out over the course of the next year or so. So really excited for you all to access some of that. Really want to make sure that units are well maintained. So all of you property managers and landlords, all the work you do around asset management is a big part of the sustainability component or a standard. Also making sure that our services are able to be flexible, which means we have to get creative with some of those funding, but also maybe innovative with some partnerships we create to meet the needs of our tenants. And then, of course, making sure all partners are working together to collect some of the information and data that we know is so crucial that can really help us understand the trends and growing needs of folks in our community to make sure that we can be responsive to them as well. We've seen that over time, communities' needs and the folks that are being served in supportive housing evolve over time. And so a lot of the data information you collect along the way really helps inform that and helps programs be adaptable to meet those needs, which then in turn makes them more sustainable. So went over a lot of stuff, a lot of details on there. Probably want to know where you can access all of that. So I'm going to throw a link in the chat. One of the first resources that's going to be there on that link that I just threw in the chat is our guidebook. You can download that. Again, really proud to say we reduced it from 28 pages to I think it's about 5, right, Maya? So it's a real simplified version of all of those. What I just shared on the screen, each of those goes into a little bit more detail and talks about what it looks like, what that can actually look like in practice to really help folks do that. I do want to quickly share before we end, and again, hopefully we'll have some time, but I know some questions have been answered live, is making sure you have access to our tools, to some tools that we have. We are rolling out these tools as we go. So many of these tools are already been updated and are available to you today. And some we are going to, again, thank you in advance for your patience as we continue to update them and improve them. And we will be absolutely rolling them out ongoing. If you got an email about this training, then you are on our listserv. So you will get notifications when these new tools come live and they've been updated. If you did not get an email, go to the link that I just shared in the chat. At the bottom of the page, there is a form that you can fill out to make sure you are on our list, and you can continue to get updates as they go. But I'm just going to quickly share some of the tools that we have, and then I'll pause for some questions. But just really want to reiterate for folks, again, the guidebook is going to be your go-to source. For those of you that are at the system level and advocates that I saw on this page, or funders around supportive housing, really encourage folks to utilize that guidebook as a way to help define supportive housing and what quality looks like. That can really help set the basis for what you're looking for your funding process when you're doing an RFP, or even folks that are have some say or some influence around your QAP, because that can really help dictate the type of funding sources available in your community for supportive housing. We've also seen folks use our tools when it comes to using the checklist as well at the policy reform area. Again, that is so a lot of the things we took out of those 28 pages that focused on the planning phase of supportive housing, we created a quality supportive housing checklist. And so that can be your guide or your go-to when it comes to figuring out how to make sure programs have the support and they need, and they're set up for success. So once they are implemented, they're meeting the quality standards and reading all the fabulous outcomes that we want to see for folks. So encourage folks to check that out. That checklist is available. It's super important and can be utilized at the policy stage, but also at the pre-planning and development stage. We also have an endorsement process, which if anybody's been involved in the Supportive Housing Institute, is a big part of that. You can utilize that for free if you're part of an institute team, but you can also reach out to us or reach out to a local you're one of your local team members at CSH to get that endorsement process. What it is basically a verification third-party review by CSH. We review all of your plans and compare them to our pre-development checklist standards, and really make sure that you have all of your program plans are set up for success and meet the standards. And so what you do is you get an endorsement letter saying to CSH, we feel confident that your program is set up for success, that once it's implemented, it should meet our standards because we've looked at all your planning documentation to do so. So that is a third-party review process. That is not a free tool. It is one of the only tools that we have that's not free. Everything else that I'll probably cover today is free, like our guidebook. Our toolkit, which should be going live later this week, has a ton of resources available to you too. It walks through those 4 components that I just reviewed, defines them a little bit further, but it also gives you a ton of tools like a sample MOU. We've got some sample policies and procedures in there, housing application. All of that is a part of the toolkit that you can download those tools for you to utilize. Very, very helpful at the planning phase. I will also say if you're at the implementation phase and you want to update things or compare what you're currently working on to other things, absolutely do that as well. So the toolkit can be your go-to source. It is my go-to source, and I know many CSHers go-to source because that's where we put all our best products and tools that we know can be useful for folks who want to operate quality supportive housing. And at the implementation ongoing phase, we also have a survey very similar to the checklist, but it's a tool that you can utilize that's currently being updated. So again, we'll announce when it's fully ready to be utilized that you can go in and basically answer some questions to really evaluate your program compared to our standards. It's like a self-evaluation tool, completely self-directed, and absolutely free to utilize. You'll get a score at the end to let you know where you stand. But if you want any ongoing support around that, that's where engaging CSH is going to be super helpful. Either if you want to hire us, again, so this won't cost a little money, to come in and evaluate your programs, we do that at the program level. We've also worked with COCs and other funders to do this at the system level. So we can do all of this at the system level or at the program level. But again, those tools are not necessarily free to everybody. But it is a resource that's available and that absolutely encourage folks to access and think about. So utilize these tools, take these surveys, download the guide, help see if they can do it. We're hoping what they can do is they can contribute to your own personal CQI process, as I said. So you can utilize the standards during your planning phase. You can utilize the toolkit and access some resources during the due phase while you're implementing it. And then you can use our surveys and other tools to help study and evaluate your programs. And then you can contact us, reach out. I'm going to go over some resources that are available to you in a little bit. If you want help with corrective action planning or just overall helping towards your overall improving and learning, again, all contributes to that PDSA or that continuous quality improvement cycle that we're hoping everybody's engaging in. And if not, that we can be a resource and support for you to do that successfully. So here's some resources, lots and lots and lots. Again, first of all, you're here because you're interested. Thank you. If you're not the designated person or you don't have a team, highly encourage you to go back and talk to your leadership and figure out what that looks like, because you do have to create space for this effort, which means you have to create, meetings or a calendar or designate a lead. If you don't already have that, I think some people do serve in the compliance or monitoring or quality data analyst roles. So that might be you. You might be a supervisor or director. That's a part of your job. But the idea is creating that space and that time to really focus on these things. Again, visit our website that goes over all of our quality tools and has a lot of the guides that you can utilize. Going to plug the CSH Training Center, all of our tools and resources and trainings and live webinars, as well as self-directed on-demand webinars that we create, are all developed because we want to help the workforce in supportive housing build up their skills so that they can continue to contribute to the fabulous quality supportive housing services and programs that you're already operating. So we have stuff that helps people in the services side. We have training that helps people in the property management side. We're developing more and more stuff for developers and owners and operators of supportive housing, as I said. And we also have a lot when it comes to supervisors, recognizing our standards don't say any of that, but we do recognize the key role supervisors play and leadership plays in making sure that programs are able to operate and adhere to these quality standards means that you all feel skilled up to be able to provide that support to folks ongoing. So highly encourage folks to check out our training center. I'll pull up another slide in a second if people want to pull up the QR code. But again, we'll send these slides out with all these links. Contact your local folks. So if you're already connected to a CSHer, reach out to them. I'm sure they'd be excited to hear from you and talk to you. They're excited about these standards being rolled out. So encourage you to talk to them. If you don't have a personal connection right now, or you don't have a team that you're already connected to, you can email consulting@csh.org or info@csh.org, and we'll do our best to connect you to somebody that can really walk you through what's looking like locally. I know you guys have a great team in Michigan. Lucky, lucky. Hi, Fred. Thank you. And then also, again, if you have any questions around quality in general, our quality tools, our standards, you can email quality@csh.org as well. And myself and some team members can also check that to make sure we give you links and resources to any information you want or need. All right. Well, that's it. It's a little advertisement about the training center. Hope to see you all there in a future webinar. Would love to have you. We've got a ton of resources and trainings available to folks so you can continue to operate fabulous supportive housing. And we have a couple time for some questions. And I think most of them got answered. Maya or Amber, is there anything you want me to specifically address? So I saw several questions. Yes, we'll send out the slides. Yes, we'll send out the recordings. We will also develop a FAQ based on the questions you guys asked here and some of you asked in your registration form to make sure that you have those follow-up information. If there's anything we weren't able to address here, 60 minutes feels like forever, and it also feels like just a blip in time when I think about all the fabulous work you all are doing. So before you leave and sign off, I just want to make sure I get to this slide to really thank you all for taking time out, prioritizing this. The folks in your community, thank you for doing this because it shows your passion and your dedication to this work and how important it is to really make sure we meet the needs of the folks in our community, getting them housed, getting them resources and services they need so they can thrive as well. Appreciate you all for doing that. Appreciate you all for taking time. All this fabulous engagement. I didn't get to interact with folks as much as I love to in the chat, but appreciate you all. I did read all the thank yous and the gratitude, so I'm sending it right back to y'all. Maya, Amber, anything I didn't get to?
No, I think we
All right.
all the questions.
Well, thank you all. Be in touch. Please go to our website, access our tools, talk to your local CSH partner, and engage, engage, engage. Okay, I see some hands, and if you all can put it in the chat, that would be great, because I'm not able to address folks directly. We have 1 minute left. Thank you all. Have a fabulous rest of your day. September is almost over, so enjoy the rest of it and have a fabulous October. hopefully folks are enjoying some great weather, staying warm, staying cool wherever you are. I guess it depends on where you are, but and don't forget to go do something that brings you joy today. You're working hard, providing quality programs and services and units to folks. Uh, you also need to take care of yourself. So go do something fabulous for yourself today, hopefully, outside of this. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. I'm going to close this out.